Hiya, Steve.
Good afternoon, Joe.
Good to see you again.
And you?
All right?
Yeah, all good. Looking forward to another episode.
Yeah, me too. Another great conversation as well. And this time we are taking a different tack and we're talking about something very specific this time. We are talking about creating high performance teams. And I know, Steve, that this is something that's really dear to your heart. Important for both of us, but I know it's really dear to your heart.
Yeah, I think partly because I've been on the receiving end of badly managed teams, which then results in badly performing teams. And then I've also seen the impact of sort of leading teams the way that I always wanted to be led, and what you can then sort of get out of that team and the impact it has on the team and individuals as well. So yeah, it's been a hot topic for me for quite a while now, and it's one that I don't think I'm going to let up on either.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be one of those conversations where we reveal quite a lot to each other about the bits of work that we've not shared. I mean, we were in teams together for a while, but we've worked in different places since then, and there's loads of stuff that you've done that I don't know about, and I guess vice versa. So loads of questions to probe and find out a bit more about what's gone on in the things that we haven't seen. And it's certainly something which I find really valuable, very, very important. And I've worked really hard to create teams that really function well together. And the consequence of that is, of course, a side effect that they're very high functioning, high performance as well. So I'm looking forward to chatting about that.
Yeah, there's definitely some positive sides to it. There's things that are quite easy to control, and people are quite happy. Control's not a good word, is it? But you know what I mean? There are things sort of within the scope of what you can and should be controlling. And then I think what we'll talk about later on as well is when you've got certain individuals who are very, very high performing, but perhaps need to perform outside of the team to get the best out of them.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems really obvious to split this into two parts, as we always do. But the first part will be about the normal times, how you go about creating really, really well-functioning, high-performing teams. And then the second half will be about all the things that can come along to skew that sideways. As you said, Steve, there, we'll talk about rock stars in particular. Subjects come up on quite a few of our recent episodes, or the term at least has come up. But then I think there's a few other things, aren't there, that we've both experienced, some things from outside of the team having effect on it as well, particularly like executive team members or very, very senior managers trying to get involved and determine how things can get. Shortcut term for that is micromanagers. But other things as well, like commercial pressures and so on. So we'll talk about that in the second half.
Yeah, and how you can sort of protect the team from that as well.
So, Steve, I loved hearing you say this is when we were planning this is a subject that's really dear to your heart. But why is it? Why do you care so much about this?
Because, we spend a lot of time at work. Everybody spends an awful lot of time at work. You spend a lot of time with your colleagues. And if you're going to work in an environment that's anything other than ideal, we start dreading Mondays. In fact, you start dreading Mondays from Sunday. And, you don't want the Sunday afternoon blues because you've got to go into that place tomorrow. And whether that's going into that place physically or going into it virtually, it's the same issue. When a team is rudderless, essentially, which, I've gone into some teams before, they're being given no direction, they're being given no protection. It's a bit of a free-for-all. The teams are being responding just to the loudest voice, which means that, the previous priority's just gone out the window. That job probably hasn't been finished. It's half-baked. So then you've got somebody shouting because their request is half-baked, whilst the next person is shouting because their thing suddenly is a priority. And what does the team do? If the team's got no leadership, like I say, they're completely rudderless. There's no direction, and that's not a good way to work. You don't get to finish any work. There's no sense of pride in what you're doing. There's no sense of achieving anything either. So I think there's an awful lot of work to be put in there from the beginning to create that environment, for people to be able to thrive and just generally enjoy the job as well.
Yeah. And I guess I feel really similar that like you said, we spend a lot of time at work, and it's got to be a really healthy, good place to work, a good environment to do it.
Yeah.
And a load of that comes from just knowing that what you're doing, what I'm doing as part of that team, is really moving the dial and is enabling my colleagues, people I'm spending so much time with, to do their best work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think for me as well, I get a lot out of seeing people develop, seeing people, given the freedom, giving people the responsibility to do things, whether it's to do new things or just to do the job that they normally do and just doing it well. And then, when you do that for individuals, then you're doing it, then you collectively, you bring that team together. And that same team, I mean, I've worked with some teams in the past which weren't achieving much. You put a few sort of controls in place, and suddenly that team, you turn the team around and they're all achieving huge things.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing seeing it when that happens.
Yeah.
Amazing seeing a team that are perfectly capable really dial it up quite a lot and becoming really high functioning. So maybe we should start getting into some of that stuff now, because I'm anxious to hear what it is you do. What's your secret sauce? What kind of things do you get up to? So I know from the few conversations we've had, you in one of your recent roles, I can't remember which one it was, and probably that's a good thing. That one of the teams you came into was just like that. They were really capable, but just they were a functioning team. But through what you did, and I'm really intrigued to find out what this is, Steve, how they became a high performing team, how they really, really, turn things up. So what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, there's no secret sauce here. And I suppose this follows on from the conversation that we had in the last episode about, kind of taking a bit of a step back and seeing the bigger picture, and understanding. I mean, for me, it was going into a business that I didn't understand. It was something. It was a type of business I'd not worked in before. So there was quite a bit for me to get my head around in terms of how all of the other teams work together, where my team fitted in with that as well to kind of achieve what the clients have been, what we've been sort of tasked with by the clients. So for me, it was about sort of understanding kind of the current situation, and the immediate thing that I had to do really was put some controls in place. So, like I said before, there was a lot of noise going on around the team. Everyone's shouting at the team. So, put some guardrails up and protect the team initially, and have all of the noise funneling through you to begin with. But then, all you're doing then is sort of triaging. But it might be that the position that you're in allows you to push back more, to ask more questions, and not just accept what you're being given. And then, you can start to make some decisions about what is a priority and understanding, why something might have to be a priority. And then you're giving the team that little bit of space to finish that task that they started last week. And then they could move on to the next priority, rather than half baking that, then moving on to the next one and half baking that one as well. And then over
It's interesting, isn't it? Sorry, I'm going to just drop in there, but it's really interesting how important it is to create space to, you talk about it there about protecting them, but I think kind of creating space for them to think. Especially in technical teams, the cognitive load on what you're doing is so huge that you need time to really think deeply about the problems you're addressing in lines of code or design problems or whatever. And if there's constant interruptions, constant things coming in to cut into the middle of that, it really dilutes your ability to achieve anything. And I remember a couple of my members of my teams saying, can we move that meeting further, because I've got this big thing to do today, and if I have things coming in frequently, then it's going to really affect me. Yeah, so it's interesting that I guess from our side of it as delivery principles, it's protecting the team. From their side, it's about getting space.
Oh yeah, I mean, just following on from what you just mentioned there, I think context switching is the biggest killer in this industry. If you're you just sort of jump from one thing to the next, and you're not getting time to sort of finish anything or give something the headspace that it needs. Whether that's to kind of think through how you're going to tackle it, and tackle the next job, or just getting your head down and actually doing the work. Context switching can be an absolute killer, and I think that's what was killing my team previously. So yeah, I think you get into this role, and you understand the kind of the lay of the land, and then I think you agree what the sort of the destination point is, and then you start, that becomes your strategy. We need to get there. Now that in the past for me, that's been, reducing build costs. It's been about speeding up the time to build something. It's been improving the quality. I think normally people say you can have two of those three things, but I was asked to provide three of the three things. But then, then going back to the last conversation that we had, this is when you then have, you put in place tactics to achieve those strategies. And then at this point, you've suddenly got multiple, kind of parallel strands of work, which individuals or sort of groups of people within the team might be managing. And then suddenly you've got numerous plates sort of spinning. So this is where, you need to have the team initially needs to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. What is their purpose? You've got to, by this point, of already having some clear roles, clear responsibilities. Making sure that you avoid overlap in the responsibilities, and make sure that that there's no ambiguity. And people need to
just as I'm listening to you saying this, Steve, what is making me think is that when you joined the team, that I know you're picturing this group in your mind as you're describing these things. It sounds like you spotted in them kind of that those capabilities were already there. They were latent somehow, and they were crowded out by the volume of requests. They were crowded out by the lack of focus, crowded out by the sheer demand on them. There's no slack built into it at all. You've got to have the three things. And one of the things you did was recognize that it was already there. They were a package. They just needed something. They needed a bunch of things in order to bring those forward. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, you're right. And also you've started to build up relationships with people. I like to spend time with people individually as well as the team. Understand what people are. What's motivating certain people. We've got some people who are just doers, and that's great because we all need doers. But then you've got people who are quite ambitious, and they might want to follow a technical path or a people leadership path as well. And it's about trying to find those people within the team. And it might be that they've got ambitions to be that leader, but they might not have the capability and the skills to do it just yet. But if you can see somebody is really keen to follow that path, help them on the journey, give them coaching, give them support, give them opportunities as well, give them the chance to step up. I had somebody who then stepped up into a leadership role as part of just on a secondment. So there wasn't the pressure to then have to achieve and then sort of leave the business if it didn't work out. It was a chance to step up, have a taste. Yeah, actually, this is what I quite like, and then kind of progress them on from there.
Seems like there's two things going on with that part, isn't there? There's one about recognizing the capability in the person in the first place.
Yeah.
And realizing that there's different paths or different journeys for people, and there's not this kind of singular path. That seniority doesn't mean people management necessarily.
Yeah,
it can mean growth within your skill and your interest and so on.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing, like you say there, when you go from senior to lead, but that shouldn't necessarily mean people lead, because I think if you put the wrong people in a people leadership role, you're doing a disservice to the team, because you need people to be managed properly, not just tick box, sort of check-ins, line management, that kind of thing.
So if you see that kind of those kind of capabilities in people, and you're spotting them and so on, as the delivery principle, what in your experience, what have you done to put stuff into place to give them a platform for exploring that, or exploiting it, I guess, even making the most of it?
I think you can try, you can try by this time you've had the conversation, you understand, what their motivations are. This is a chance for, you can give people some responsibility, start to try out being a lead, and that could be, You get them to lead like maybe a small initiative or do some exploratory work or something like that. So you give them a purpose, you give them a task. It's essentially a small project, okay, where you say we want to understand more about X. It could be something like, I don't know, QA automation. We're going to explore new tools for that. I want you to go away. I want you to come back at some point in the future and sort of explain to me what the options are, what the benefits are, do some comparisons between the different options that are available, and give them ownership, give them responsibility and accountability as well. I think all of this is quite important, and see how they respond. Make yourself available so that they can sort of keep coming to you if they've got questions, because this is quite a new thing for them. Give them a chance to make some mistakes, give them a chance to sort of achieve something as well. And then, you review it at the end like you would review anything. How did it go? Were you comfortable doing that? Were you a bit out of your comfort zone? What have you learned? What would you do differently next time? And then see if there are the building blocks there to then sort of give them perhaps more responsibility and eventually leading bigger initiatives, whether that's, leading teams, leading projects, leading technical projects or whatever it happens to be.
I had a really nice thing in a recent role I was in with someone who joined my high functioning team. We were doing conversational AI, and she joined as a conversation designer. Had a degree in linguistics and had worked in that field ever since. And so came to conversational AI from a linguistics point of view, which was excellent. She was really smart for understanding the fine nuances of how language structures, like phrases, sentences, and so on, fit together in order to get the right out of people. She was really, really good, really, really smart. But in talking to her, I discovered that she also had a particular interest within that context in accessibility. In the world that I'd been in previously, in fact, when you and I were working together in big government contracts, the stuff we'd done together, accessibility was really all about how you interacted with the thing on a screen. You could use accessible technology to, assisted technology. Could you use assisted technology to interact with with web pages and web apps and the rest of it? Contrast ratios and colors and that sort of stuff, font sizes and what have you. What she was particularly interested in was accessible language and people who have different educational dimensions, people in second or third or fifth languages. How would their experience of a chatbot in this particular instance, which is becoming more and more important in the modern day and age, how would interactions with a chatbot differ? And I realized this was such an important dimension for the business, but also really, really important for her. I also knew that we had someone else in the business from a part of the design team who had a very long and quite impressive career in accessibility through visual design. And so I got the two of them to work together on creating a community of practice around accessibility within the business, so that there was a forum for the two of them to talk with each other, for me from my engineering background to be involved, for others in the product world and others in the design world and so on to get involved as well, but to have this place that was outside of project, your client context, outside of the product context, and a place on a kind of Friday afternoon almost to spend time collaborating with each other, and then to have people to talk to. And what I really wanted for her was to be the principal in that community of practice. So rather than asking this guy with his 30 years experience, it wasn't quite that long, but his long experience in that world to take it on, because it's the natural choice. Maybe she could take it on and maybe she could lead this. She's got some great instincts and some really, really amazing expertise.
Did she end up leading?
She did, yeah. She was really good at it, really good. And good because I think she was naturally quite details oriented, and so she was very good at doing the research, bringing in materials from outside and posting them into the group. Worked really well.
That's good, being able to give somebody, opportunities, and then watching them grow and sort of, take full advantage of the opportunity and sort of delivering something at the end.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that's become really obvious to me as you were chatting, Steve, is that there's needs to be kind of almost rule zero with this. Is there an assumption in teams that the people you're dealing with are experts in their field? As part of this team together, they are bringing a bunch of expertise, even if you have a background in their area yourself. If you've done some of it in your past, both of you and I have been programmers at. That if you're talking to someone who's a programmer, you have to assume that they're the expert, and you might be able to be a good rubber duck in talking through pull requests or particular challenges with some of the building work they're doing, but they're the expert, and that you've clearly done that loads, and I wonder whether that's a presumption that you don't realize you're doing. You're already bringing to it as a high functioning delivery principle yourself, that you're already doing that, having that presumption built into it, your interactions with your teams.
Assuming everyone's an expert. I think I assume that certain people are experts or very capable, and I think you work that out from the interactions that you have with them initially. It's quite obvious who the very capable people are. But then I think you also have to understand the gaps in capability through the team as well, because you don't have the team's not a bunch of seniors from one into the next. So yeah, I think it is.
But it's about having kind of making the presumption first of all. I think anyway, making that presumption first of all, and then through interactions, through experiences, through working together, you realise, oh, okay, yeah, you do have a challenge in this area, or you need some support in that area, and then you can say, let's give you some more time. We've got Friday coming up. It's going to be quieter on Friday or whatever. Then spend some time working on this.
Yeah. No, I think that is a good approach, because I don't want to be in the weeds. I don't want to be down there with them, sort of helping them deliver. Yeah. Much rather, like you say, just assume that they can do that, and then you work up it might be that you end up like a skills matrix for the team, understanding what the team itself is capable of, what the individuals can do, and then you start, as part of creating this working environment, you start putting in place personal development plans for people, so that's sort of aligned around their ambitions, what they want to achieve, what they want to learn, the different opportunities that they will be open to as well. And then you start to, you've got a lot of collaboration going on in the team there. Sometimes you have people in the team who can teach other people, so you've got kind of cross-training going on as well. But but all of this as well takes time. This is not something you do overnight. This comes from a lot of conversations. It also comes from, for me in the past, what I've ended up doing in a few places is creating like a management layer beneath me that didn't exist previously, because if you end up with quite a big team, you can't be effectively line managing 20, 30 odd people at a time. Yeah. You need to have other people sort of who are helping to manage people within the team as well.
Yeah. That skills matrix thing you were just mentioning, I think, is really important when you come to configuring things for specific client projects. You get to understand, partly these 4 or 5 people work very well together, but also this project is going to involve that set of skills quite heavily. So we need, this person, Tom and Talvin and so on, need to be in that team over there in order to make sure that thing happens right. Yeah. They need that sort of thing, or we can't let it happen unless this person is free, and so we need to schedule it for then, because that's when Jenny becomes free from that one over there and can be
and skills matrix as well can be a good thing to you can also sort of use them as like a snapshot in time. If you start off, you get version 1 of the skills matrix, when you start to play things back to the team in 6 months or 12 months time, it's quite nice to then have an updated version that you compare the two of them side by side and say, look, this is where you were 12 months ago, look where we are now, and then look at all these other things around it that you've managed to achieve as well. Sometimes people need to be reminded of just how far they've come, and sometimes in quite a short space of time, what they've achieved, because it's quite easy to perhaps not see your worth when you're in it. and you're sort of living it. I think you need to be able to give people a chance to step back and sort of play it back to them, so they're kind of looking down on themselves almost, so they're just seeing just what they've achieved, but to then appreciate just sort of how much more they are performing as a team and as individuals as well.
There's one thing you've said a couple of times, and I think it's probably worth just talking about it a bit more. It's about receiving recognition for things. And it was just what you were saying there, in part, coming back to it 12 months on or whatever. But one thing I've done, and I know you did this in the past when we worked together, I presume you've carried on doing it, is using context that happen anyway as a chance for someone to stand on the platform and shout about what they've done. So sprint reviews are the classic thing, aren't they? Every couple of weeks you get a sprint review comes around. What I've tried to do is to get the person who's done that element of whatever it is that's advanced the iteration for this sprint to demonstrate it, if it's possible to demonstrate it. A few times we haven't been able to demonstrate the thing because you need everything else to work together. What I've got them to do is to go through the code that they've written, for example, and talk about, in fact, I remember going through one sprint where a guy had just spent a load of time writing a load of tests for stuff. Test coverage had been missed out from a few things. And I got him to talk about what he'd done with his tests, and he loved talking about the tests. And I loved hearing him talk about the tests, but what I really got him to do was to say why it mattered so much to have these tests configured in this way. Why did they, how did they work together so that we have better protection for the system going overall, what had provoked it in the first place. And it was amazing seeing him going through line by line. I've written this line because without that line, that doesn't work. And this absolutely has to work. I had it like this. Misconfigured first of all, things were passing and then breaking, and so we had to fix this. It was great seeing him describe it, and I got really happy. I got really energized seeing him doing it, and I could see it on the video call we had, see it in a few of my colleagues as well. And there's that thing, isn't there, about receiving recognition in public, and I think that's really important for the CDO. Where possible, you're maybe not involved in sprint reviews very often, but you have an amazing influence to be able to do something in public for an individual to say what Jeff has done. My list of example names is quite thin. What Jeff has done in this thing has really been significant for the project. Even though you'll hardly ever see it, it'll only get run in a bunch of automations. You won't see it happening. But it means that we can be really confident every time that we deploy this thing that it's going to be absolutely robust. And huge thanks to Jeff for the effort put in.
No, I think you're bang on. And often I find the likes of your Jeff there, he might be someone who doesn't like to stand up and sort of talk about what he's done, but you put them on a platform, you know that they are knowledgeable, they've got enough to talk about, and then suddenly they start getting questions from the team about it because people are interested in what they've been doing. And then you find that they're really enthusiastic, and then their enthusiasm is quite infectious. And I think that's one of the good things that people don't want to hear me talking all day. I'll sit in a strategy review with the team just to tell them how great they are, where they've come from, and where they're going. But I far prefer getting the team to talk for itself and the individuals within the team talking to the team. And it's a good way to spark conversation between people who won't naturally stand up. You've always got the gobby ones in the team. You've got the people who sit at the back. And it's quite nice to pull those people forward and get them chatting to the team. So like Jeff there, talking about his automated tests and with enthusiasm, you start getting other people involved. I think it's all good for the team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've always taken that as one of my kind of core principles for building high performance teams is praising people, finding every opportunity I can to give people praise. Usually that's one-to-one. Loads of times when we have like a some sort of event, some sort of on meeting in person or online, I'll often be sitting there with my computer. Say if it's an in-person event, chatting on the direct messaging tool and saying to the person across the room that I can't talk to because we're listening to the speaker.
Yeah.
You did that. That was brilliant. Thank you so much for what you did for that. I really appreciate what you've done. Or they've got a public recognition, and I said to them directly, on the chat, you really deserve this. It couldn't have happened to anyone better. You've done a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything you've done over the last 6 months. And then there's the stuff you do within the team, so that as a team you're really gelling. And if you constantly picking out people within the team, not the same people all the time, but over time you're covering everybody.
Yeah.
Then within the team you're building that sense of, my commitment, my effort, my contribution, that's the word I'm looking for. My contribution has been spotted and appreciated, and that makes me feel good. And I know that when I do another contribution, that's also going to be spotted, and that's really good. And then there's the thing doing it to the wider business, and that's where, especially as a CDO, someone with that level of seniority, you can take those larger events and stand up and say, I want to take a particular moment to say thank you to Liz, because this incredible thing has been done, and we could only have done it because of Liz's vision and so on.
Yeah. There's something I wanted to sort of just briefly touch on as well. So, we're talking here about appreciating individuals, sort of promoting the efforts that they've put into the work. I think something you really do have to watch out for, and this is why, being quite close to individuals is important, is that overload and burnout can be masked as high performance.
Yeah.
So you've got some people who, he does a great job. He's always here at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. He gets loads done. But then if that's happening all week, and then you realise it happened all last month as well, and it's happened the last 6 months, some people are not quick to complain. They don't kind of start to normalise very long hours, hard work and working evenings, or suddenly some emails come through the weekend as well. And I think that is sort of slightly, if you like, the darker side and of the sort of people management and awareness. And I think for all this is, we've talked about lots of positive stuff here as well. I think you also need to understand something what certain people might be hiding. So that's another
feels like we could do with a longer conversation about that. That's a really big issue. I'd really like to talk about that in more detail. I've done a few things in my career to guard against all that.
Yeah.
So let's chat more about that one. Just before we finish the first half, I thought it'd be really good just to mention briefly about the need to have standards in a team. There's obviously technical standards, but I think there's also functional standards, the kind of norms of behavior, and it includes the technical standards and so on that you want to make sure you're achieving. But there's something about establishing what those are going to be in the first place, partly about showing them from the front, leading with them, displaying them, those ways of behaving professionally.
Yes.
There's making sure then that your team is achieving the standards and that you're maintaining them through, project on project, week on week, month on month, year on year. And then there's also that degree to, now we're going to be a bit more courageous. We're going to lift the bar. We're going to have our stretch targets and so on. On that note, let's press the pause button and come back after the break and talk about handling the challenges that come to high-performing teams. Catch you in a bit.
See you in a bit.
Welcome back to the second half.
Hello again.
And in this half, we are going to chat about the things that can affect those high-performing teams and about how we might handle some of those challenges. Steve, I know you've got particular experience in some of these, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say on some of these things in particular. Many of them are experiences we've both had, but the first subject we're going to talk about is about that thing we mentioned in the first half. It's come up in a few of these podcast episodes about rock stars, handling rock stars in the business. And I guess what we're talking about here is having a high performance team that feels probably lopsided, maybe overbalanced by the weight of particular personality in it. Have you got particular experiences Well, I guess you have because you were keen to talk about this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got some good and bad experiences. So, usually you find that the rock stars, and in my experience, the rock stars have generally been developers. And typically they're very capable developers. They're the ones who are the first to sort of resolve the big complex problems as they come in, or have some an emergency drops. They're the person that they've already got their sleeves rolled up and they're already halfway through the solution.
Yeah.
And they get some of these people, they get a lot of adulation because they are the ones who are visibly fixing that security loophole or that bug that's preventing people from completing something on the website. Um, but often you find at the start they get bored of the day-to-day work. They just want the exciting work where they're always getting pats on the back. Everybody thinks that they're great.
Do you think that's one of the first signs when you start seeing someone who's getting a bit, antsy about the day to day?
Yeah, definitely. I find that I've found in the past that they can become arrogant and sort of difficult to manage. They become complainers as well.
Oh,
Now,
yes.
sometimes you know, some of these, some of the rock stars I've worked with have been absolutely amazing, and they've been a real credit to the team and to the organisation as a whole as well. But you get some people who perhaps get a bit too big for their boots, a bit too soon. They're good, but they're not as good perhaps as they think they are. They become arrogant. They complain a lot because they think that they're untouchable all of a sudden, and they start to distance themselves a bit from the team. And then I think that's where you get a lopsided analogy that you mentioned there, because they sort of sit slightly outside of the team. So then you've got that kind of imbalance. Now, the team generally has something that they're working towards. They've got there's KPIs and that they're expected to meet. There's an amount of work that generally that has to get done by the end of the sprint or whatever. And then when you take one person out of a high performing team who is not performing to the standard that the rest of them are, suddenly you've got that imbalance. It makes it more difficult to achieve things, and the rest of the team are then having to kind of mop up that extra effort that's needed in the team, and that's when it becomes a negative for the team. The team start to notice it, and the team start to raise it with you, and it's something that you've got to deal with. You've got to sort of nip it in the bud quite quickly as well.
Yeah, that burgeoning arrogance that you mentioned there, that kind of it's a real, it's like a gimme, isn't it? They talk about that in poker, not a gimme, a tell, like
Yes.
you see in poker. It's you
Uh,
can start seeing the kind of yeah, you believe you're the real business. I remember working with you mentioned mostly it's engineers, but I remember working with a designer who I found quite challenging as he grew in confidence in his abilities, and it was great. It was growing in confidence, but I remember being in meetings that I found really quite stressful because of the unexpected behaviors that I was observing in a colleague, and was I didn't know really how to respond to them in the context in the meeting right there and then. I didn't at that point in my career didn't have quite enough seniority to say buck up, Sonny Jim, and you know uh, what you're doing, just back off. But there was a brewing arrogance, I think, that was obvious there, and I remember not that person, but seeing that similar traits in other people, like at conferences, um, high flyers in other businesses, the big name people in other businesses who were actually, I could see that they were, because I knew some of the other members of the same businesses, could see the mess that they were causing
yeah.
through some of their antics and causing a huge amount of damage. And as you were saying there, that so many others were having to mop up the mess behind them.
You get some rock stars who, I mean, I've worked with them before, and like I said before, some of these people are really good, and some of them work for the better of the team. They're there
Yeah.
supporting the team, and they're also the people who, when I go into a difficult conversation with a client, I'll roll them out. Because that these people are so good at what they do, without being arrogant. and that adds so much value. And I think you've got to manage people. You need to know how to manage these people, whether they are the arrogant ones or whether they supporting the team version of the rock star. Um, and usually, the arrogant ones, are they even aware that they're arrogant? Are they
Yeah.
aware of the kind of the situation that they're causing? I think sometimes you need to just you need to point these things out to them, be quite open and honest with them. Um, remind them about the role and the responsibility, because they're probably not carrying out the role to its fullest. And also, you know, are there any personal issues as well that they're dealing with that are affecting their conduct within the team?
Yeah.
You've got to sort of go a
Yeah.
little bit wider, because sometimes there are things going on outside. Like we're going to touch on things like commercial pressures later, but is there anything that's affecting that person individually as well? Don't just assume that they're being an arse. I think we need to sort of also consider that people have
Yeah.
things going on outside of work as well. So I think, you need to have a conversation fairly early on, point out what the problems are, and give them a chance to sort of defend themselves as well, and then see if you can
Yeah.
come to a resolution.
I know certainly in my earlier in my career, I would have found these kind of people quite difficult to approach, would have found
Mm.
them prickly and not knowing quite how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Later on, now at this stage of my career, um, with this degree of experience, actually, I think is the key thing for me. Um, I would definitely feel differently about handling it, and I think I really resonate what you said there about just not letting it get away. Raise the issue straight away. Get almost immediately after you see it happen. If it's in a meeting like that one I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier on,
That
the now me rather than the then me 15 years ago, the now me would have dealt with that by meeting immediately afterwards, going for a walk, or having a virtual meeting and
yeah.
saying, this was really difficult. I would really appreciate if you didn't do that
Mm.
again. The consequence in the meeting was this. The consequence for your teammates I saw was that, and being much more direct about it. I think. I would. I like to think I would.
Yeah.
I know I can. I'm trying to just replay some of the things of the last couple of years, in particular, where I've had really challenging behaviors in colleagues and in clients, actually. Rockstar clients, rockstar product owners, where their behavior I found really difficult, and I've ended up having a couple of really difficult conversations intentionally, but having it immediately. And I think maybe one of the important qualities in handling potential rock star behaviors is not letting it run away and become that. There's a difference, I think, isn't there, between a rock star and a diva? Obviously it's different genres of music, but there's a degree in which you want the Freddie Mercurys and so on of the world. You want those people who are brilliant, but you don't want the prima donnas who have this whole list of riders that you've constantly got to make sure you're maintaining. There's only blue M&Ms or whatever, the equivalent, the technical or workplace equivalent of making sure that they've got the right fluffy toys in their peace and quiet room. So
Yeah, we don't want the arrogance. I mean, drop the arrogance straight away. But I think as well, don't let this go on too long. If that's a mistake I've made in the past, letting performance issues go on for too long for whatever reason. These are things I think you've got to nip them in the bud pretty early on. But somehow you need to work out how you're going to work to their strengths, how you're going to benefit from their strengths.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to say let's talk about that, because it's not all negative. Let's not just be negative about this. There's a lot of positives as well, and I really like the way you've already brought it into conversation, Steve. That there are lots of potential positives from having rock stars in the business. What have you seen that have been beneficial? Because you're talking that way. I know I can detect that you have.
Yeah, I mean, what I've ended up doing in the past is almost taking that person out of the team. They became not a team player. They were still involved with the team to a degree, but they became more of a specialist, somebody who you could sort of kind of drop into a problem and kind of help resolve that problem. They had a huge amount of domain knowledge.
Yeah.
They also occasionally acted as a coach. So they will
Ah,
essentially teach. I mean, sometimes when people are really arrogant, it's because they think that they know more than everybody else.
yeah.
So it was a chance to sort of see how much do you know, and let's see you
Yeah.
give some
Put
of
your
this
money where your
arrogance
mouth is.
give some of this arrogance back in a positive way. And that did work because they weren't doing that all of the time.
Yeah.
I think they found it very difficult to concentrate on sort of what they would consider more menial tasks. So let's not give them menial tasks because this person can add a lot of value in what we're trying to deliver. And let's just get them to focus on those kind of the deep rooted problems that might come up occasionally, things
Mm.
that need a lot of, you know, you're relying on people that have got a lot of years behind them and a lot of domain knowledge to actually be able to see that bigger sort of architectural piece and understand where the problems might be coming from and so on. Just using them there to the best. I was using them to the best of my advantage essentially, and taking them out of the team, which then sort of
Yeah.
solved the problem in the team as well.
Yeah. 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 So
Doesn't
there's
mean you
definitely
want to do
that
that.
degree to which they've got broad experience beyond the specific domain that you talk about domain knowledge and completely absolutely. But there's often broader knowledge as well, which can be brought in and have that really, high explosive kind of impact on.
Yeah,
Maybe that's telltale, and we're talking about it as high explosive. We don't want high explosive, we want things blowing up, but that really, really high impact effect of being able to bring more color and flavor to addressing a challenging problem that's
yeah,
been bugging the team.
absolutely. Yeah.
Phrase that I've heard you use a few times, Steve, is like, and particularly I'm thinking more sort of client focused with this, is sometimes it's about bringing up the big guns.
Yes.
I know that I can think of two particular examples in the last 4 or 5 years really clearly where I've been interacting with a very challenging client. Um, I guess where they had their own rock star CTO or chief marketing officer or whoever it's been that we've been interacting with, and I have been so glad to be sitting alongside our big gun, the
Yeah.
howitzer, um, who's been able to really bring a huge amount of depth and challenge to that assertiveness
Yeah.
of the client.
Yeah. I think when you know that rock star's background, you know that what they're saying comes from years of experience. You've seen evidence of them working well, just how effective they can be. Then, yeah, you're rolling somebody out who, whether they're arrogant or whether they're not, they're a safe pair of hands and that they're somebody who you feel confident in allowing them to give advice to the client essentially and go up against whoever it is that the client's rolled out as well.
Mm.
But yeah, it is quite nice to have these people in your pocket occasionally and just roll them out when things get challenging.
Is that a big gun in your pocket? Are you just pleased to see me?
I didn't quite know to say to that.
I think there's a degree also in which having rock stars actually can be very beneficial for the business in as much as they can be great ambassadors.
Mm,
Certainly, I can think of times when I've been to conferences when I've seen the rock stars in other businesses and been kind of envious actually sometimes and thought, oh, you are obviously really super smart. You really get the change in this business or in this industry, and you're leading the way. And how great it must be to be in a business that's thinking that way. If only we had one of them, kind of thing.
mm,
Um, and I can imagine, of course, if you're a customer, seeing that as well, how great to get X company involved because
absolutely.
wow,
Yeah.
they're just the impact they will have will be great. So there's a kind of ambassadorial role, which I think is maybe neglected or forgotten about rock stars, and maybe that's something as CDOs or as certainly as executive teams we should be thinking about. Are really highly capable people. Is It's important to get them a public
Oh
face,
yeah, yeah,
important
yeah,
to get them out
yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, that's yeah. Use their knowledge, their experience for that. Benefit from it. Often these people love to talk. they love to be challenged as well. A lot of these people, yeah, I think use it as much as you can.
Mm. So that's another feature of something inside the team, actually. But I wonder whether we might spend a few minutes talking about things that happen outside the team that can throw it off kilter, that can prevent it from being a high performing team, despite best efforts that we talked about in the first
Yeah.
half. We've both got experiences of that, both got experiences of the teams that we spent a lot of time nurturing, protecting, supporting, encouraging,
Mhm.
and so on, coming along and being knocked sideways. Maybe it's worth spending some time talking about those kind of external things. One thing which is obvious is when those outside the delivery world have an impact on the delivery itself,
Mhm.
or people who should just be getting out of the day to day. As I said before, the shortcut term for that is micromanagers.
Yeah.
I think you've got some particular scars around that, Steve. We're not going to name
Oh,
names, of course,
yeah.
but I think you've got some particular scars around that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked in, God, just thinking now, I've actually got quite a lot of examples of this, but
Oh no.
working in a consultancy, and then you work on the client site, and the client, I've got multiple examples where the client has then employed project manager to essentially micromanage, and all they're doing really is create noise. It's normally born from a point of mistrust, very word, where there might be historical bad blood between supplier and client for whatever reason, something which is not related to me and the team, and they've automatically just dropped somebody in there to kind of micromanage, make sure that they are happy with the way things are being run, and all it does is it just creates unnecessary noise and disruption for the team. Starts straight away. You've got inefficiency, um, and people are constantly being questioned about the decisions that they make. And when
Yeah.
I get that decisions have to be questioned sometimes, but not to the degree that some of these micromanagers do. It's just
Yeah.
it doesn't add any value.
Yeah. I remember working on a government project. Let's just say it had something to do with aspects of justice, without naming the particular government department.
Yeah.
But I remember a micromanager being brought in quite a late stage into that project. There was a change at the executive level, a
Oh
change
yeah.
of personnel. There is a natural churn. People have fixed terms and so on. This new person at the very top of the exec team brought in a whole load of new personnel, and that changed it in from an agile project essentially into a waterfall project, or there was
Mhm.
pressure to change into waterfall because it felt as if that was the confident way of making it really safe, I guess is the word, isn't
Yeah.
it? People are looking for, but
Familiar.
it brought the opposite, and what it brought with it was a micromanager that became really, really hard to contain. And there was a lot of divide and rule in that one. And me, as the technical delivery lead, being taken out of the room several times to have conversations with this micromanager separate from everybody else in the delivery team. And then I had to think very fast on the spot to make sure I was not saying things that were going to compromise any of my colleagues or the way in which we're approaching this, and pushing back as hard as possible. But it's really hard.
Yeah, they're difficult people to manage.
Yeah. And it's the drip, 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 drip of that kind of approach, that kind of personality, which is really hard to resist over time.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, no, yeah. I don't see. I've never. I don't have any good examples of micromanagement
Yeah.
on whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it'll happen again. It'll happen multiple times again in the future where someone will try that, whether that's somebody internal or whether it's based, whether it's somebody coming from the client. So you've just got to learn to deal with it, and it's up to you to protect the team from that
Yeah.
micromanagement and sort of just let
Yeah.
them get on with the job that they need to do.
Yeah. The second dimension, I think, of these external things that's worth just spending a bit of time talking about is the commercial pressures. And
Yeah.
the two that I've experienced, one we talked about in a previous episode, of where the industry itself changed, and we were really conscious that we if we didn't change, we would be left behind. That happened particularly with the AI company, where we were happily working on conversational AI and structuring the whole product around conversational AI, and then large language models came along. We did some quick experimentation to begin with, but if we didn't integrate it right into the heart of the product very, very early, we would become antique really quickly.
Yeah.
And that commercial pressure was powerful. Fortunately, we raised to it, but that kind of thing, which I think provokes the need for a pivot, as we talked about in the previous episode, is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I've worked for companies where they're owned by another company as well, and sometimes the owners at the last moment decide that they're going to make some changes, or they want to start to see more of a return on their investment, and that can have a significant impact, in a major kind of pivot in terms of strategy, which then impacts the team as well. And it's these are real huge disruptions often for the team to deal with.
Yeah.
But sometimes it answers why you then have micromanagers, because sometimes that's just how people feel. Let's just drop somebody in there and make sure this is running okay. And it just becomes a huge mess.
Yeah. And the last one I wanted just to bring up was the commercial pressures that happen from commercial underperformance, which I've also had to live through painfully, where the sales marketing wing of the business wasn't really up to scratch for what we were doing, and the negative consequence on the business itself, it just became more and more painful.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of angst for a year before the inevitable. And I think that's the thing which was really on my mind. Sometimes those commercial pressures are just so big, there's an inevitability about them. And so in that circumstance, I had to wind a team down because we just couldn't keep going. And that was really, really painful. We were an exceptionally high performing team, small within the business as a whole, but incredibly high functioning, but commercial inevitability came to bear. And so the work then for me as the CDO was to look after people. I spent the 6 weeks or it was actually almost 2 months in the end of wind down, all the various processes of winding down, doing a lot of care, looking after people, making sure they were okay. We spent a lot of time talking to each other, talking with each other. We spent a fair bit of social time together, just hearing about how we're coping with stuff, making sure that as we were working together on the technical or on the delivery parts of the job that was still there, that we were winding down, that we were still doing a good job. Everything was thoroughly documented and so on, but there was a kind of a underlying pain built into it all. But I felt my job as the delivery principal there was to look after everyone. And I had lots of one-to-ones and so on. Those commercial pressures, there's just sometimes you can't do anything about it, no matter how high functioning your team is.
Yeah, I think when things are starting to be wound down, even like you say, it's like 12 months in advance, the team quite often are very aware. Doesn't matter how the executive team wants to spin it. Quite often the team pick up on it straight away because there's clear indicators. And trying to keep people motivated when they know that that's coming that's a tough job.
Yeah,
obviously don't underestimate the wider awareness of the team.
Yeah, especially as a delivery people, you see what's coming through from customers, and if the rate of work coming through from customers is slow or low value or whatever, you're kind of at the coalface. You see it immediately, really. Yeah, we're not naive. Cool, great conversation as always. So, just to quickly recap, we've a game of two halves, and we talked about how to create high performance teams in the first place. All those behaviors that are needed in the normal times of assuming expertise and then building an understanding of people's skills and capabilities as a result of that, building trust and respect that comes from seeing those efforts being put in in order to build things forward, that we're working as one team towards shared outcomes. We need giving praise and credit and encouragement wherever, about establishing and maintaining standards. And then in the second half, we've talked a lot about handling those external challenges, in particular, what happens when you have huge personalities or hugely capable people, rock stars, high-performing individuals sometimes come with big egos as well. And there's lots of ways to deal with it. Often they're negative, but there's lots of real positives if you think creatively and thoughtfully about it. Sometimes that needs an abrupt early intervention, but they can be great ambassadors. And then just that very last section, talking about the external pressures that might come on from impacts from outside the team, micromanagement and commercial pressures in particular.
Yeah.
Another cracking conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot to. I just suggest that we're older, doesn't it, when we've got a lot of experience.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's been a good conversation.
Great, good stuff. Thanks ever so much, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye for now.